Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the many blessings your Son has given us. Thank you that we could have this group meeting today. Please help us to be able to use our time carefully and productively. We love thee very much, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Okay, so this week we are going to discuss the case study. Does someone want to give us kind of just a quick synopsis of the case? Well, you know what, I can. So it says 7 months after the Columbia accident, the Columbia Accident Investigation Board presented the report on the causes of the accident. The board pinpointed the technical cause of the accident. It also identified organizational issues within ASA dating back decades. The CAIB also reported how manager might have behaved differently during the mission and stressed the organizational shortcomings at an ASA that contributed to the catastrophe. So what is the main issue here?
What I saw after reading like 2 or 3 times is that there are people that know what is or have the idea about what is causing the problem, and there are a lot of steps that they need to take in order to get to the person that is in charge. I know that this Rodney Rocha, he is the one that has his thoughts on the foam strikes that is causing damage to the orbiter. So they don't believe, I think. They don't think it's a big issue. And after having like passed so many time, they don't consider it as a serious risk because during this time there have not been any kind of issue with the foam, so they think it's not important until this tragedy happens.
Yeah, they didn't even, I mean, the method, it seems to be able to prove an actual flight risk, or whatever they called it, has to go through the entire scientific method. You have to have a hypothesis backed by facts and other data that shows how this is going to be affected. The problem that they had with this particular instance is that they were never given the clearance or the ability to take advanced imaging to find out how bad that damage was. And so because of that, they couldn't prove the scientific method and really bring this issue to full light. Kind of like what you mentioned, because of organizational issues, the people that were passionate about this issue were able to talk to the people that would have been able to grant them access. And it mentions in the case a couple of times, I can try to find the quote, but basically it says, what we found at NASA was a culture that was more proved to me that there's something wrong. And if you can't prove it, like definite proof, if we don't do this, then they're going to crash and die. Then they're not going to worry about it.
Do you kind of feel like they were doing like they were using some of these past experiences as test stages, but not thinking of mortality or not thinking of these people as being people, just more of tests? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you know, when you do the scientific method, you have your test phase and you could use whatever you need. But I feel like they were using these people as kind of guinea pigs before actually doing the steps that they needed to prevent this kind of thing.
Well, I don't know if that is the thing there. I think I read in the case that they were concentrating on other things rather than the security of the team. I am
right.
Not sure.
That's what I'm saying.
But I don't know if they were explicitly trying to test the textile dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
to me, it just seems like kind of like an issue. I mean, they've had this issue for 20 years now.
Right.
So kind of accepted a margin of risk to say, hey, we're not really going to worry about it because this has happened so many times. It's been fine. So, yeah, we'll acknowledge that it's there. We know it's more dangerous than it has been in the past, but we don't have enough data or anything to suggest that it's more dangerous than it has been for the last 20 years while this is.
Right.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just a couple of, I mean, we don't have to go through every single question this time, so we're just going to pick a couple of different questions and kind of analyze them, or kind of, you know, just to kind of go over some of these things. So, what evidence is present in this case of some of these biases? So at the flight readiness review meeting, senior NASA managers concluded that the foam shedding was an acceptable risk. Each safe return of a shuttle, despite numerous foam strikes, affirmed management's belief that there was a low risk of failure.
Yeah, I would say that, yes, the thing is that they think that the foam was a problem. Nothing serious really happened. And that is why after some time they put that under, like, it's not a flight risk.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's because it's not like nothing, like lives are not lost or anything else happen. So yeah, that's why they are thinking that it's not a risk.
Well, and as it's stated in the study, you know, they, over time, as shuttles continue to land safely, so even though this foam issue was, you know, a risk, and that was causing damage on everything, it still continued to be safe at this particular time.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that just kept getting me about this whole situation, though, was foam shedding in the past was a very minor thing. Yes, it happened, but it damaged very little on the spaceship. The imaging and everything from this foam shedding suggests that this instance was very different, that the burn-through rates and everything like that were going to be compromised, that the insulation on the walls were going to be messed up. Yeah, the DAT team or whatever, DAT, debris assessment team, concluded from their mathematical equations that the damage was going to be really bad, but then it was basically set aside because they didn't account for having harder material on the very last part of the foam of the tiles. So I feel like, yes, there was a lot of bias to say, oh, it's going to be okay this time because it has been in the past, but I don't feel like they weren't listening to the data that they were being given.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So what is shared cognitive framing? Hint: frameworks, beliefs, and assumptions that help us simplify a complicated reality.
I'm not sure. Would that involve this engineer that was thinking, well, he believed, right, that it's going to be a repercussion in the future if they didn't take care of that right now. But maybe others just think that was his belief or his assumption, and he really tried to get to upper levels, to managers, and they did not trust him, or they underestimate his point of view and his research and evidence in the case. You know.
Yeah.
I guess I mean, when I was thinking of that, how did it get to that point of where, you know, somebody brings you all this evidence supporting what they're saying, hey, this is a risk. I don't understand why people would just shove it off.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the reasons why they did just put it aside is because it wasn't definite enough to say if this really does go through the insulation walls, then the whole ship is going to disintegrate. That was never stated. During the Apollo 13 mission, when the oxygenator went out, that was a very real problem. If you run out of oxygen, you're going to die.
Yeah.
NASA addressed that one because they said, hey, well, I mean, this is a very pressing issue. We know that if the oxygenator is compromised, they're going to die because you have to breathe. And so I think one of the reasons why this one wasn't dealt with was because they said, hey, well, yeah, it might have the potential to cause a break in the insulation wall, but we don't feel like it's sustained that much damage. So we're not going to worry about it at this point.
I also think that they didn't have that much time to do that. They talked that they started meetings really late before the Columbia was launched. And I think they didn't have time to assess that properly.
Yeah. Well, and it was only, 6 days? They finally found the damage at 9:30 a.m. on flight day 1, the day after launch day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by day 8, this entire ship was destroyed. In that time, like you said, there's just not that much time. How much can we accomplish in 1 week?
Yeah.
Real damages on a $5 billion spaceship using one satellite image.
You would think it would hold up better. Okay, so we already actually talked about when did the problems with Columbia begin, when they began. So why did the debris strikes become an acceptable risk?
I think it has, at that point, it has happened so many times. They were thinking that it was only a part of it, like it was normal. And yeah, they didn't have serious issues with that. So they started to think it's okay. It's not a dangerous risk. It's an acceptable risk, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had accepted that conclusion in 1990, 13 years before the incident. And it happened, I mean, if you look at Exhibit 4, it's happened in 1981, 1983, 1988. It's just happened so much that they just accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it took 9 years for NASA to come to the acceptable safety of flight issue.
Yeah.
Which is a long time, but I think that they really needed to dive into that to really discuss and figure out, really what the acceptable issue and how to solve that issue. Sometimes it just doesn't take, a short amount of time. Sometimes it takes a long time to dissect issues like that.
The thing that I was always bothered by every time I read it is the foam debris was only occurring from the left side, and I'm sure they did lots of research to try to figure out why that was. But it seems to me that if you're going to put together a spaceship that you're going to use multiple times, and you're having this problem before, I would try to go in at least and modify the way it takes off, modify the way it was built, find out which team built the right side of the ship, which team built the left side of the ship, and who controls the foam debris things as a whole. Because I mean, it again just blows my mind that they didn't do more research beforehand or during that 20-year process to resolve the issue.
Yeah, I agree.
Like once again with the Apollo 13 oxygenator issue, they resolved that issue in a matter of days with duct tape. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but I'm sure it's not that simple. But
yes, yeah. I mean, it took so many time to accept that they were wrong. I mean,
yeah,
there came one person that advised them that this is something serious, and then nothing happens. I think they were thinking, okay, 1891 or 1983, they get to know about this problem about the foam, and then the years happen, and again, nothing is like really serious. And after the accident, and people had to die for that, then they have to accept. I mean, we make a mistake. We should have thought. We should have made research beforehand. Because yes, Chandler said it was not like a toy or a drone that you were sending to the air. It was an expensive orbiter with people, with lives in it. They should have done that properly. Mm-hmm.
Well, and even after the accident occurred, Dittemore, I'm trying to remember his first name, but Dittemore, let's see, NASA Chief Sean O'Keefe downplayed the concerns of those he described as foamologists. And Dittemore refused to believe that the foam caused the tragedy. And I quote, "Does not make sense to us that a piece of debris could be the root cause for the loss of Columbia and her crew. There's got to be another reason." So even after all of this happened, they're still saying after the accident, it wasn't the debris, there was something else.
Yeah. So, I think this is a really important issue at an organizational level. When you when hire people like in important positions, they have their point of view, they have their research or whatever, and they do not accept others' thoughts because they think, they are convinced that what they have gathered, that what they know already is enough. And I think that happened there. This person, this engineer, was really like, I know that this is a problem, and because other people, with the team, I would say, they all agreed on something, they are not letting others to contribute to it. So it is a real problem when you get to say, what I know, it's enough, and I don't need to hear others' opinions.
So then one of the other questions is, how would you characterize the culture of NASA's strengths and weaknesses? And I think we covered some of that. The accountability. People didn't want to take accountability for prevention. They didn't want to take accountability after it happened. They wanted to try to shove off what essentially had happened to someone else.
Yeah.
Which question was that again? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
What's that?
Which question were you just addressing?
How would you characterize the culture of NASA?
I was trying to remember which reading it came from when it had a breakdown of the different leadership styles. One of the things I think that is difficult about the culture of NASA is that I don't think there's one specific head. I think there's lots of different departments and different department heads, and all the department heads have to come together and work together in a very cohesive manner. But I'm not sure. I mean, these guys are geniuses. There's no doubt about it. They're the smartest people on the planet. I mean, growing up, what third grader doesn't want to be an astronaut or of some sort when they grow up? You know what I mean? These guys are top of the notch smart. One of the reasons why they don't accept other people's opinions and other things like that is because they've gone through so many of those opinions already and either proven or disproven them for themselves. For them to accept things by word of mouth from people that they don't necessarily fully trust, that's really difficult. And I think there's some organizational issues there of who do we accept what analysis from, and at what level of scrutiny do we accept those analyses?
Well, I will say from personal experience, those who are smart or brilliant or, the just amazing minded, they have a hard time with hearing other people's opinions. My brother is very smart. He is very brilliant. He has a very high IQ. He has a very hard time working with other people, dealing with other people, and actually listening to other people's opinions. And you get a bunch of smart people in the same room, and I'm sure it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you guys. It's, as Chandler was saying, they have been through a lot of stuff, a lot of preparation, a lot of studies that, and they already know that, yeah, why would they consider this phone problem if they already have gone through the same issue before, or they already have studied that before. And yes, there must be, it's difficult for them to accept opinions from others that they don't even trust, as he said.
It's not like they're trying to not be accepting of other people's opinions. I'm pretty good friends with a really smart guy that's going to a theology. He's getting paid to go be a scholar basically for 6 weeks and study the connections between the brain and the heart. He was very skeptical of the church and faith for a very long time, and because he just doesn't accept other people's opinions so easily. It's not that he didn't just accept them. He's like, okay, well, that's a nice opinion, but what's the science? What's the logic? What's the reasoning behind it all?
Mm-hmm.
So because the scientists, in this case, couldn't prove the logic or the reasoning or whatever behind their hypothesis, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they couldn't accept it, is because it's not that they weren't willing to listen to the issue. It was that there were invalid assumptions and conclusions.
Yeah. So I would add that a weakness that they have, what I can see, is that there is not enough communication. You see that when this guy tried to warn or to prevent or whatever, he was trying to ask for pictures or images, and he couldn't get to the person that he had to. And when they got this order to take images, they rejected that because they didn't know who that guy was, and it was not an official thing or request. So yeah, they don't have like a coordinated line. It's not well organized, I would say.
Yeah, well, and it said early on in the case about contractors versus employees of NASA.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of complications and things like this where required, not asked, required to bring in independent contractors from other companies that helped manufacture various parts of the spacecraft or the orbiter. So that comes up with, like you said, a lot of issues of what is the line of authority between the contractor per se and NASA itself.
And contractors aren't as vested into companies that they are contracted for versus employees who actually work for, they're just there to do a job and move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we don't have a lot of time, and I'm sure, Chandler, you need to get going here, I'll post the video, and then we can talk about, do you guys oppose to talking about the world application on the discussion board?
I'd rather just take a couple extra minutes and talk about it here.
Okay.
I don't like discussion boards.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Okay, so world application, so personal experiences, and board application of principles. So, I think we really did talk about, some of our personal experiences, just knowing people and, how can we apply this personally to us?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of choosing which battles you want to win. You want to pick your battles carefully. For us, it's a life and death scenario, but it could be applied to lots of different platforms in life, whether it be family or work or church even.
I think a lot of times we have a little bit more of an advantage than some other people in the world because we have the Holy Ghost to kind of prompt us and be like, no, you need to fight for this situation. And I think sometimes if we put a little bit more fight into what we're doing, we can get, sometimes, not always, but we can get a little bit further. And I feel like if that guy had just fought a little bit harder and said, no, we really need to look into the situation, then things would have been just a little different instead of, I'm not saying that he necessarily gave up, but I think sometimes if we put a little bit more fight into it, we can get a little bit further.
Yeah, and I think the organization must have people that have qualities of leadership that can, listen to others and work together. And I think if that organization have like the right leadership, they are going to have success in the little discussions or disagreements that they might encounter. We see that with NASA, it was a little hard to get others to understand what the problem was. But if they would have had different organization structure or if the leadership there would have been better, then other would be the outcome, I would say.
I agree.
Yep, I do too.
Okay, well, I need to go, but you guys can keep talking or whatever, and if I miss a couple points or whatever from the conversation, I miss a couple points.
Okay, you have fun.
Thanks.
Enjoy.
All right.
So, the last of it is, you know, what principles, if any, from this lesson reading apply to this case?
Oh, I really, at the beginning, I was thinking that this book was like with different stories.
Right.
And it comes up that it's only for one. It's only one or person that is leading an organization that is not in the best position.
Right.
And I really enjoy that. At the beginning, I was feeling sad for Catherine because it seems like she has experience to change the environment in the organization, but at the same time, she kind of take time to analyze, and she doesn't participate as much as she should. So I find it like people in this organization, they have already, they think they can work by themselves. And as long as their group, as long as their responsibilities are okay, they don't need others to get involved.
Yeah.
So I think that is what happened with them, with NASA, same thing. They were focusing on what they know it was better for them, for their responsibility. But they didn't consider any other people to get involved, to participate.
Or options, yeah. It feel like it was a one-track mind kind of thing. Like, we're gonna go this route because this is what we know, instead of opening up to other options.
Yeah. So you see here in the book that you need to know about that if you work in marketing, that it's okay for you to know about finances. It's okay for you to know about human resources. You have to know what other people are going through, or what the organization is at any point. You just need to know about everything.
Sorry, my son has decided to wrestle with the dogs right here in the living room.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
Oh, so yes. Awesome. No, stop. Go put her in the kennel. Okay, so I really think this honestly was a really good, it was a good case study. It was good to actually like see real world problems that happen and how they handle them.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas, stop wrestling the dog. So, yeah.
All right.
So, all right. Was there anything else? I think we pretty much covered most of it. So,
I think so.
All right. So. Well, I will go ahead and I'll get this posted, and have a good rest of your week.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Have fun. Bye-bye.